It looks like we're on.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And a roll call, please, Dahlia.
Melvin too.
Here.
Susan Sayer.
Present.
Steve Carter.
Present.
Martin Bond. Ray Host.
I'll make a motion for the approval of the March 3rd meeting minutes.
I'll second that. Okay, we've got a public hearing on the zoning code amendments. However, we have no public, so I guess there won't be any comments. Does anybody else want to mention anything about it or talk about it before we move on?
I think it's a good clarification of some of the things that did have covered before.
Slow but sure on zoning. The staff report, why don't you go ahead and tell us what you need to tell us?
Yeah, you guys have heard this before, because we have this, these kind of the preliminary drafts, but it's an upgrade to our existing subdivision regulations. Really doesn't change much, just kind of, I think it gives better clarity at certain points, makes it easier to understand for the city and the developers. There's a couple of new provisions that should be helpful. There's a boundary adjustment provision that will allow you to consolidate your lot. You know, let's say you have 2 or 3 lots and you have one building and you want to consolidate those. It's a pretty simple process. You need to get a survey. And then you bring it in, it's called a boundary adjustment plat, and the city can't approve it without any sort of board review. It's a zoning code requirements. So pretty simple process. Any subdivision, I think it's really important just to kind of note this again, anytime you divide any property, it does require to go to planning and zoning first, ultimately the board. City attorney and I did review this, and the city attorney had, the final product which you have tonight, the city attorney had reviewed in some detail. But we thought about maybe having a provision which we would call a lot split, in which you could take one lot and basically split it in 2, which is a subdivision, and have that approved administratively without a vote of the board. I mean, I've worked in communities that did that. In our situation, it's pretty rare, honestly, that, in my opinion at least, that shouldn't go through some type of board review.
I would think so.
Yeah.
I would see problems on lakefront property, you know, them wanting to split up 100 foot, you know.
Well, and it has to have the same distance in between and all that, so if you only have 100 feet, that's gonna.
Well, I'm just was using that for an example.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm
I wouldn't
saying.
want to see them trying to take a large lot and letting it split it, it's listing out.
No, I agree.
Right, and that's exactly the point. And I wouldn't be comfortable doing it myself without the board's approval. Anytime you split property, you create a new lot.
Mhm.
And that's, again, something new, and I think it should go through the boards. So that's what you have in
Is it in here then?
Yes. Any
Specifically,
division
any
plan
division.
requires the board to review and approve. Because our process is generally pretty quick, if somebody proposed, let's just say tomorrow, right? They wanted to propose a subdivision. They still could get approved almost within the month, right? They'd have to wait for the next planning and zoning meeting in May, and then the May board of trustees meeting, which is just a little more than a month. But that's about the worst case scenario. You know, I mean, typically, 35 days, 40 days is about the longest someone might have to wait for simple subdivision.
Does that.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
Yeah. Don't have
Yeah.
to say.
Sure.
Yeah,
Don't.
exactly.
So, any case, minor and major subdivisions, that was in the, that was in the regulations before, and it's included now. Not much else different, really. You might notice in there, it kind of struck me, I think it's airspace, I don't have it right. There's a provision that talks about division of, I think it is airspace, and I asked the city attorney, what is that? And what that is, it's a condominium type of situation where, in fact, I own a condo, so my condo is on the fourth floor, and that piece of real estate is not, I don't own a single inch of property. So anyway, that was the attorney, the way for him to accommodate those types of condo situations. But any case. Any other questions?
No, and all we're doing tonight is recommending that the board, pass this subdivision ordinance.
I would make one other point. One reason we felt this was a need was in the event we did get a subdivision of any size, let's just say it was 20 lots, which isn't huge, but that's still a fair amount. I mean, the old code would have accommodated, but it was a little bit clunky maybe. The new one, it is very streamlined. That type of preliminary plat, we call it, would come to the Planning and Zoning Commission first, and then ultimately the Board of Trustees. And so one situation in which the Planning and Zoning Commission, really is kind of the first line of, first point of contact with the developer is gonna be those subdivisions. And, I hope we have one of those in the near future. But just be ready, because if we have one of those, the Planning and Zoning Commission is the first point of review. And frankly, it's really where I think a lot of your real substantive review gets done. If it passes planning and zoning and moves forward, I mean, the Board of Trustees has their role. But if the system's working well, I think the Planning and Zoning Commission is really kind of the one that sort of, kind of manages that on behalf of the.
I would feel, inclined to go and drive the property and look at it, because they're gonna have to say where drainage and all that is on their subdivision, so. Yeah, I would definitely want to look at it if somebody came up with one. Someone?
Make a motion to approve.
No, to send it to the board to.
Oh, make a recommendation for approval of the amendment.
There you go.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
This next item on here, I'm sorry, so I'm not looking through the pages. Next item on here is, to begin working on a comprehensive plan for the city, because ours is 16 years old. And generally speaking, the city's plan is usually outdated in 5 years, so we desperately need to update it.
Do
And
we have that? Seems like a short period, 5 years. Is
there,
I think
we have, the last one was in '09,
there?
and so it was actually Roger put that together. Pardon me? I skipped 5?
And the thing,
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, it says commission review.
yeah, that's after the public hearing, then there's staff report, then we have a commission reviews on recommendation,
Okay,
which we don't send it to the board.
okay. So we're talking about the voluntary annexation of Michael and Roberta Rice. Right.
That's continuous. that's right on the backside contingent to the last one we just did, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Is it in this paper?
Yeah, I sent it out and amended it. This came in kind of late, but we had time yet to add it to the agenda, so.
So, had we already looked at that property? As far as.
That's the property
They're
that's
just,
right behind Como.
oh, okay, it's,
It's-
Rice is the concrete
Yeah.
place, right? And he's not gonna run any concrete business out of it,
No.
he's simply,
And he wasn't requesting sewer and water at this time, right?
okay, well, I'm happy with anybody that is wanting to annex that does need
That
to
just enables us to,
a little further up that street, yep. So, does anybody have any other discussion about it?
Oh, I think it'd be a great idea.
So should we recommend to the board that they allow that?
during kind of report on it.
Yeah, let me, real quick, the zoning.
He wanted C2, wasn't it?
Yes. and-
C2?
Yeah, and I met with him, and we went over the zoning code together. What he does is he runs a concrete contractor shop out of there. And it fits the C2 zone perfectly. And so, I mean, there's, the property right next to it is zoned C3. And that's that storage building property, that's, and then, of course, Como's the same way.
Right.
Now, this one kind of sits back, right on 5, this Rice property. And so the C2 zone is fine. I would not zone the C3. That would allow, like a big yard or some type of thing back there.
Well, he doesn't have any highway frontage, so I can't imagine he's gonna put any kind of walking.
I think he just has a building back there they
Yeah.
keep forms.
Yeah, and he abuts, there's a, I think it's a transmission shop in front there on 5.
Yeah. There it is.
Right. And so, if that would want to come in, then of course that would be his perfect C2 zoning also. And then that little collectibles, there's a property.
The colorful place?
Boy, you're nice.
Yeah.
Was that in Sunrise Beach?
It is not.
It's not, but at some point in time.
I
He
don't think,
did not want to be, and that's okay, because, where the Rice property will be, it actually attaches to, Russo in the back.
Right.
So it could get water and sewer in the future.
Sure.
Easily enough, but, okay. So,
make a motion, to send this recommendation to the board.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now, staff report again, so go ahead and talk about your city plan.
Okay, so Susan has suggested that we move forward on this, and her and I have had this discussion for quite some time, and we recently came across a consultant out of the Kansas City area that we think might work for us. You guys have heard me talk about comprehensive plan before, but just basic review. 2009 is the last time it was done, 16 years ago. It was fine. That plan was fine at the time. But so much has happened that the water and sewer system got built, woods came in, all sorts of stuff. So it is definitely time to update it. What we're proposing here would be engaging this consultant to do what we call the public engagement or the outreach part of it, surveys, forums, meetings. You've got to do this. You can't do a comprehensive plan without engaging your community, trying to get a lot of feedback. And that's the one piece that I would really need some help with. Even if I were capable of doing it, in my opinion at least, I think it's better to have an outside party handle that. You don't really want the city staff or even the board of trustees, plan and zoning really driving it. You really want to open it up to the community.
Right.
And so I think that's a good reason to have a consultant. Susan and I met with them virtually. I had one in-person meeting with one of the two, not both. And they're capable for sure. They're also somewhat new. They haven't done a lot of this work, but they've certainly done enough to convince me that they're capable of doing it. And then, I do like their fee, frankly. I mean, it's, if you want a full-blown comprehensive plan from start to finish where the city staff's really not involved, I mean, you're looking at minimum 50,000, probably closer to 100. That does not suit us. It just doesn't suit our budget. It's not necessary. This year, their total fee is 15,800. I think it's pretty reasonable. I think it would get us from where we need to. It would get us going and get us started.
What kind of time frames?
We kind of control that. If we were to engage them now, we would want to start. It's hard to say for sure. Getting something done before Memorial Day might be a little bit quick.
So we could probably have it done by Labor Day.
I think so. Yes.
It's all gonna depend on having people give us input. I mean, that's the hardest part.
That's the trick part.
We have to get input.
Get people to get input.
I mean, the things that will go in it, like our future streets, our future water and sewer, we already have that kind of information mostly. And, so we really need the input. Talk it up with people, tell your neighbors and friends to give us some input.
And what kind of input are we looking for? I mean,
Well, I think you're gonna hold meetings or something, aren't you?
Yeah, basically what would happen is the consultant would meet with the board and planning and zoning together is what we did. And really get a lot of feedback about what you all are thinking. Really kind of some of the questions to ask, right? You've heard me talk about this before. How does the community feel about RV parks? How do we feel about lakefront development? What's the right setback, right? I've heard different opinions on this. When it comes to housing, I mean, do we want to really open the door to multifamily housing, make it real easy through the zoning code for those types of builders to come? Or do we want to be a little more restrictive? Airbnbs is a good question, how do we feel? Do we want to, we want to make some attempt to regulate those, or does it matter? I would honestly like to get a little bit of feedback about, what people would like to see from a permitting standpoint. Right now, we don't really require many permits for construction development. My own opinion, I think I like that. I don't think there ought to be a lot of hoops to jump through myself, but you just don't know. I mean, on occasion, I've heard from some people, the phone rings rather regularly, frankly, about building permit requirements. And, I tell people we have none. And on occasion, people say, but there's some people might question that. We're not in any position to start enforcing building codes. But, pose that question to the community. I'd be curious to what response we get.
Well, then our fire does a large portion. As far as foundation, footers, electrical. So,
We have been doing, you guys ought to be aware, we've been doing a little bit of code enforcement, kind of almost under the radar. And we do get those complaints on occasion. This property is trash, for example. And so we've been doing some of that. I haven't felt like there's a big demand out there, like the community is saying, clean this up, clean that up, clean it. It doesn't feel like that to me. The ones that we have gone enforced on are really pretty obvious. They're they're ones that seem to be, anybody can drive by and say, yeah, it doesn't look so good. But same story, what is the expectation? Parks and Rec, sorry for kind of going on, that's another great one. I would love to see a little park, at least something, right?
Would this also encompass things like building a new city hall?
Yes,
Public Works building,
yes,
Police department.
yeah, thanks, that's an obvious one that I forgot. What I'd probably put in the survey is, do you think we need a new city hall, yes or no? If you think so, then, what do you think might be the right budget? How much money would you like to see the city spend on that?
I would hope that if you do that in the survey, you would say an all-encompassing city hall, police department, public works. Because I think that when people hear that, we have the police department in that little bitty building down there, and we've got this little place, and we try to have meetings. I think when they hear all encompassing, having it combined, I think that would sound better than just, should we build a city hall?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's important, if you're gonna move into the future, that's the way most, cities do now, is they're all combined now. So I think that's a good idea to push that.
I agree. So, are we recommending something?
Yeah, so next, so basically we want to move forward. The commission would be asked to make recommendations, yes or no, to
Right.
the consultant. And then next meeting with the board of trustees, there'd be I draft up a resolution for the board to approve it.
I'll make a motion that we send this recommendation to the board.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Right?
Okay, well, thank you, and it is an exciting project. We do have a lot going on, but it's very needed, and I think it's probably a good time because, obviously the tourist season it's already kind of started, but it's gonna hit full swing soon. I think it'd be good to get a lot of feedback, doesn't necessarily need to be just the locals. One thing we talk about with the consultants, we definitely want to distinguish between the residents, people who live here, the businesses, and then, of course, the tourists. And you can do that, pretty simple to do that through your surveys. But I'd like to hear what, the outsiders say. What do you like, what do you don't, what don't
I'd
you
like
like?
to get some input on that. Airbnbs,
Mhm.
how do people feel about that, Their neighbor might have been a pretty decent neighbor, but then he turned it into an Airbnb and they're getting, I would like to see some regulations on, I would assume that might follow under police, but, time when the music should be turned down and, that sort of thing, kind of keep a little lid on how much fun they're actually having.
We don't have anything in.
Well, I know there's some places where you have your Airbnb hotels that are like an open market Airbnb.
Instead of just a private.
Right. The cities normally require some form of licensing for that.
Right.
I mean, we don't have a hotel, but if we had a hotel, I'm sure there would be a license for them to operate it.
Well, and even in the other cities around here, Airbnbs are not included in hotel tax.
Didn't they drop the hotel tax altogether?
They did now, yeah, but they're trying to get it back. They're looking to get it back.
I wouldn't say I take on a lot of complaints about Airbnbs, but I definitely get a few.
I don't have any around me, but I was just curious.
And I'm sure you guys have heard this, but the complaints I get is they take up parking spaces, they use my trash can, dumpster, right?
Yeah, right, see that.
You know, and then noise, I mean, I've heard some of that too. But, you know, you can kind of enforce the noise, if it's a big rowdy party, you can call the police right now. They can go down, but when you know, parking and so forth, I mean, boy, that's
tough.
I mean, yeah, it's hard to do anything with that. So, I know.
mean, there's probably could be some form of regulations adopted. You know, if they did a licensing form for that, you know, you have to have adequate parking for X amount of cars. You have to have trash service.
Maybe not even worrying about charging them for a permit, but knowing that they're gonna do it.
Yeah, just the
So the-
stipulations of it.
Right. So the police department would know that it could possibly be rent or not. You know?
Again, maybe the community says, no, we don't want that, we wanna do Airbnbs without any restriction, or, it's hard to say.
I hope we get a lot of input. I would like for people to tell us what they want. We can't do what they want unless we tell them.
I do think with this consulting firm, we will definitely get some, there's no doubt. One thing I feel very strongly about is you must continue to use the paper surveys. It still works. I've done this type of work in my past. So we send out a survey to every single resident, all our water customers. We make an effort to even distribute it by hand if necessary to businesses and so forth. So you will see those paper surveys come back. And then you do, of course, the electronic too. And, you know, I've used SurveyMonkey to others, but that stuff works pretty well too. I mean, I think we'll get a fair amount. So I do too. You know,
Well, this will also encompass areas of like trying to get box stores. So, you know, restaurants, so on and so forth.
Right.
right? And going back to Parks and Rec, for example, if you have an adopted plan, you know, it gets you points, right? You know, going after the big box stores, that's, I don't know if that would be, maybe the community wants that. Hotel, you mentioned hotel earlier.
Yeah, I'd like to see one.
Yeah, I know. I've heard a lot of talk about that. So let's just say that there's the people say we got a hotel, right? Well, then maybe we budget for something. Maybe we try to find somebody that's really good at getting hotel developments to come down. You know, or maybe we make it real easy through the year zoning for a hotel to come here. Or maybe even provide some incentive of some type, which I wouldn't want to necessarily offer that up, you know, just out of the blue, but you know, if it's a clear community priority, maybe you do something like that. So
Is the survey gonna ask them if they will participate in a meeting or?
no, I mean, if you want to put a focus group together, you're going to need to do that before this whole.
Well, I think the number one feedback's gonna be, affordable housing, would, you know, that's gonna be number one on their list. You know, it will be. I know there's nothing we can do about it, but that's gonna be what they're gonna want.
Well, it depends on land and
Yeah,
builders.
Being able to get someone to do that.
Well, and I have gotten those calls. I've taken a few. But just so you know, right now in the C zones, any of the C zones, you can't do multifamily. You gotta get either a conditional use permit or a rezone. In my opinion, I feel frankly pretty strongly about this. The C zone should accommodate the apartments. I think it'd be fine. I don't want to necessarily name the parcel, but there's been a piece of ground that's been for sale for a little bit. I took a couple of different calls about somebody wanting to put apartments in there. Both times I told them, it's just, the
Well,
the
how
commercial
did
zones
we,
don't.
zone the one that, that's gonna be right there in front of Hawks Nest? It was gonna be across from another duplex. How is that zoned? You know which one I'm talking about?
Hawks Lake.
Hawks Lake. Hawk Lake. When where the yellow building is, right behind there, there's a little road and it has one. We had people come through here and get, zoning to build another duplex there.
Yeah, that does have duplex zoning, maybe multifamily
So that's not C2.
on it. Yeah, that's not one I had a recent conversation on, but, yeah, there's a small section of R2,
R2.
and that's only duplex.
Okay,
Right.
that's only duplex, okay.
There's one, it's a commercial parcel, like I said, I don't really want to name it, but, you know, 2 inquiries about apartments and the C zoning just doesn't accommodate.
Huh.
And both ones, you guys know, it's a pretty simple process to get a rezoning through. I don't think it was the reason these people, didn't proceed. But again, if it's a priority for the community to be one apartments, then just make your zoning open to it.
Well, and that's what's got me confused, because we've got those apartments right there where we turn right across from Oak Star. There's some highway frontage that would have had to have been C2 at one point, because there's a dog grooming place right next to it.
Right, and what is it now? What's it zoned now?
I think it is zoned
That's not,
R, yeah, it is, I'm sorry, R3.
yeah, be the same as the apartments right there.
I think what happened, if you go back to, that's when all this, the zoning code was implemented, that. So I think a lot of the stuff was zoned as it isn't, I mean, you guys would know better, those Beachwood apartments were probably before. Right? So they just zoned that R3, and those apartments we're talking about there at Singing
Yeah,
Oaks.
those still been there quite some time.
And I think at the time, the way I look at it, I think there was a desire. It seemed like the community was really strong on commercial. And I don't think the housing was that much of a thing, maybe.
They were hoping that all along 5 would be commercial industries. All right, anything else, anybody?
Make a
So,
motion to adjourn.
okay, all in favor?
Bye.
Meeting adjourned.
Very good, thanks.
I did, meet with, superintendent